Remember me, cowboy? I'm the Apache girl you saved years ago. I've returned to marry you. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the wide prairie with shades of gold and red. The small frontier town of Red Willow was quiet, except for the occasional creak of a windmill or the lowing of cattle. Most townsfolk had already gone inside their homes, and the streets were nearly empty. Yet, in the distance, near the edge of the forest, a sound of frantic shouting and hurried footsteps broke the peaceful evening. A young Apache girl named Diana was running as fast as her legs could carry her. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum, and her breath came in short, sharp gasps. She clutched a small bundle close to her chest, her dark hair whipping across her face as she dodged fallen branches and uneven ground. She could hear the shouts of men behind her, the rough voices of outlaws who had attacked her camp. Her family had been caught by surprise, and in the chaos, she had been separated. Fear clawed at her, but she forced herself to keep running. Just when she thought she might collapse, she stumbled into a clearing. There, the sun caught the gleam of metal. Guns aimed at her, faces twisted with anger and cruelty. Panic surged through her, and she froze, unsure which way to turn. That was when she saw him. Jack, a tall cowboy with broad shoulders and a calm, steady gaze, appeared seemingly out of nowhere. He held his rifle at the ready, but there was no fear in his eyes, only determination. Ayana had never seen a man like him before. He stepped between her and the outlaws, his presence firm and commanding. "Go!" he shouted. "Run to the trees and don't look back." Ayana hesitated, but his voice was strong and sure. With a final glance at the outlaws, she bolted, heart racing, toward the safety of the forest. Jack didn't move from his spot. Instead, he turned his attention to the men chasing her. His rifle rang out sharp and precise. One by one, the outlaws ducked, fell, or retreated, and within moments, they disappeared into the shadowy edges of the prairie. When the last echo faded, Jack finally turned toward Ayana. She was trembling, knees weak, trying to catch her breath. He approached her slowly, keeping a careful distance so as not to frighten her further. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently, kneeling down to meet her eyes. Ayana shook her head, though tears streaked her dusty cheeks. "No, I'm not, thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack offered a small, reassuring smile. "You're safe now. That's what matters. Come on, we need to get you somewhere safe." With his help, she stood, her small hand gripping his arm for support. He led her through the woods, moving quietly but swiftly, until they reached a small stream where the water ran clear and cold. The sound of the running water seemed to calm her nerves, and she bent down to drink, careful not to let her guard down completely. Jack watched her carefully, noting the strength in her despite her fear. "You were brave back there," he said. "Not many could run like that with such courage." Ayana looked up at him, surprised. No one had ever called her brave before. I had to run," she said softly, "or I wouldn't be here." "I know," Jack replied. "And that's why you're still here?" He paused, then added, "I'm Jack, by the way, Jack Harper." Ayana hesitated, then said her name quietly. Ayana. From that moment, a silent bond formed between them, fragile but strong, built on the shared experience of fear and survival. Jack helped her gather some water and food from the nearby stream and kept watch as she rested. The night grew colder, and the forest around them whispered with the sounds of animals and the rustling of leaves. As they sat together, Ayana finally spoke of her family, describing her village and the attack that had separated her from them. Jack listened intently, never interrupting, his presence a steady comfort. The sun had completely disappeared, leaving the forest bathed in silver moonlight. Jack knew he had to find a way to get her to safety before the outlaws returned. The next morning, Jack led Ayana through hidden trails known only to him, paths that wound through dense trees and across sparkling streams. He moved with confidence, guiding her carefully while teaching her to stay quiet and alert. Along the way, he shared small stories of his own life, of the ranch he ran, of the cattle he cared for, and of the lonely days and nights he spent under the wide sky. Ayana listened, fascinated by this stranger who seemed so ordinary yet so extraordinary in his courage. Days passed as they journeyed together. Jack hunted for food and found safe places to rest. Ayana, though still cautious, began to trust him more with each passing day. She admired his skill and calmness, and in moments of danger she found herself relying on him not just for protection, but for guidance and reassurance. One afternoon, while resting near a shaded clearing, Jack noticed the small bundle Ayana carried with her. "What's in there?" he asked gently. Ayana hesitated, then unwrapped the cloth. Inside were small trinkets, mementos of her family and her people, beads, feathers, and carved stones. "These are all I could save," she said softly. "They remind me of home." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of her memories. "Hold on to them," he said. "They'll give you strength, even when things are hard." That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, they made camp by a quiet river. Jack built a small fire and Ayana helped gather dry wood, her movements growing more confident. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Hope that she might see her family again. Hope that she might survive this ordeal. And perhaps, hope that she was not entirely alone in the world. Jack noticed the change in her. "You're stronger than you think," he said, watching her as she carefully placed twigs into the fire. "And brave, too. Never forget that." Ayana looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the flames. For a brief moment, the fear, pain, and uncertainty seemed to fade. She felt a connection with this man who had appeared in her life at the exact moment she needed him. She didn't understand why, but she knew she trusted him completely. As the night grew darker, Jack kept watch while Ayana slept. The memory of the outlaws' cruel faces lingered in his mind, but he refused to let fear take over. He would protect her, no matter what. And Ayana, waking briefly in the middle of the night, felt a quiet sense of safety she hadn't known in days. By the time the first rays of sunlight touched the forest floor, Jack and Ayana were ready to continue their journey. Though they faced uncertainty, danger, and the unknown, they moved forward together. In that moment, a bond had been formed, one born out of courage, trust, and the unspoken promise that someone was looking out for the other. The days ahead would test them in ways neither could imagine, but the memory of that first rescue, the moment when Jack had stepped in and saved her life, would remain with Ayana forever. It was a moment that would shape both their lives, a moment that neither time nor distance could erase. And deep down, though neither of them realized it yet, that single act of bravery had planted the seeds of something more, something that years later would grow into a connection neither of them could ignore. After the rescue, life slowly returned to its usual rhythm for both Jack and Ayana, though in very different places. Jack went back to his ranch, a wide spread of land dotted with cattle and rolling hills. The work never ended, feeding the animals, repairing fences, and preparing for the coming winter. But even amid the hard labor, his mind often drifted back to the young Apache girl he had saved. He remembered her dark eyes, wide with fear yet shining with determination, and the way she had trusted him so quickly despite the chaos around them. Jack couldn't explain why he thought of her so often, but he knew her image had planted itself deep in his heart. He wondered if she had made it safely home, if she had been reunited with her family. The thought of her wandering alone, facing the dangers of the world without protection, gnawed at him. Meanwhile, Ayana's life had changed as well, though in ways she had not expected. After the attack on her village, her people moved further into the forest, away from the towns and settlers. Life among her tribe was both comforting and challenging. She learned to hunt small animals, gather berries and herbs, and understand the signs of the forest. Her family tried to rebuild, but the memory of the attack lingered, a shadow over their daily lives. Despite being surrounded by family, Ayana often found herself thinking about Jack. She remembered the calm strength in his voice, the way he had stood between her and danger, and the kindness in his eyes. It was strange to think about him. He was a stranger in a world she had only begun to understand, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting had changed something inside her. She had been frightened and alone, and he had given her hope when she thought none existed. Years passed. Jack continued his life as a cowboy, respected and trusted in Red Willow. He helped neighbors when needed, defended the town from small threats, and worked the ranch from sunrise to sunset. Still, there were nights when he would sit on the porch, looking out at the horizon, and think of Ayana. The memory of her gratitude, the way she had clung to him for safety, and her quiet courage haunted him in a way he could not fully explain. Ayana, now older and more confident, moved among her people with grace and determination. She learned to read the signs of the land, to protect herself and others, and to face challenges with courage. Yet, no matter how much she grew or how far she traveled in her own life, the memory of the cowboy who had saved her remained vivid. She wondered if he ever thought of her, if he had remembered the moment as clearly as she had. Sometimes she would sit by the river, clutching the small trinkets she had saved from her home, and imagine what his life might be like, imagining him riding across the prairie, thinking of her as she thought of him. One day, Ayana's curiosity and longing became too strong to ignore. She made a decision that would change the course of her life. She would return to the frontier town where Jack lived. She had grown into a young woman with a sense of independence, courage, and a heart full of hope. The journey would be dangerous, but she could no longer ignore the pull that led her back to the man who had saved her. Ayana's tribe prepared her for the journey. Her family and friends gave her food, blankets, and guidance, warning her to be careful. She nodded, determined but respectful, understanding the risks she faced. With the first light of dawn, she set out on horseback, the wind in her hair and the horizon stretching endlessly before her. Each mile she rode was filled with memories of the past, thoughts of Jack, and hopes for the future. Back in Red Willow, Jack's life continued much as it always had, but one evening, something unusual arrived. A letter. The envelope was simple, made of thick paper, and the handwriting was elegant, yet unfamiliar. Curious, he opened it and read the words that made his heart stop. "Remember me, cowboy? I'm the Apache girl you saved years ago. I've returned to find you." Jack dropped the letter, disbelief etched across his face. He read it again, slowly, carefully, as if seeing it once more might confirm it wasn't a dream. Ayana, the girl he had saved so many years ago, she had returned. She was seeking him. His heart raced, emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years flooding back. Relief, joy, nervous excitement, and a strange sense of destiny. He couldn't believe it. He read the letter again, each word igniting memories long tucked away. The fear in her eyes, the moment she had trusted him completely, the bond they had formed in that brief, extraordinary time. Jack knew he had to prepare. He polished his boots, cleaned his rifle, not for danger this time, but to honor the man he had become and the life he had lived since then. He found himself pacing the porch of his ranch, thinking of the day she might arrive, imagining what he would say, how he would react, and whether she would even remember him as vividly as he remembered her. For Ayana, the journey was long and exhausting. She traveled through forests, crossed rivers, and navigated rocky hills, always keeping her eyes on the horizon for signs of the town. Each night she made camp under the stars, thinking of the man who had once saved her life. She spoke to him silently, asking if he remembered her, if he would accept her now as an adult, as someone who had grown and endured hardship. Along the way, she encountered small obstacles, unexpected rain, difficult terrain, and wild animals, but she pressed forward, guided by hope and determination. She remembered Jack's words from that long-ago day, "You're stronger than you think." Those words became her mantra, giving her courage when her legs grew tired and her spirit wavered. Finally, after weeks of travel, Ayana reached the outskirts of Red Willow. Her heart pounded with anticipation and anxiety. The town looked much like she had imagined: dusty streets, wooden buildings, and the distant hills she remembered from Jack's stories. But now, it was not just a place. It was a place where her past and her present might finally meet. She walked cautiously through the town, asking quietly for directions to the Harper Ranch. People stared at her, curiosity evident in their eyes, but none questioned her presence too closely. She was determined, focused, and her mind was entirely on the man who had saved her. When she finally saw Jack, it was as if the years melted away. He was standing near the stable, working with a young colt. When their eyes met, time seemed to pause. He looked at her, recognizing her instantly. Though she had grown and changed, the same spark, the same bravery, the same eyes were there. Ayana took a deep breath and approached him. "Jack," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fluttering of her heart. Jack dropped the rope he was holding, his hands trembling slightly. "Ayana?" he asked, almost in disbelief. She nodded, a shy smile playing on her lips. "It's me. I've returned to see you." Jack stepped forward, unsure, his eyes searching hers. I can't believe it." "After all these years, neither can I," she replied. "But I had to come. You saved my life, Jack, and I never forgot." In that moment, the memories of the past, the fear, the rescue, the bond formed in a fleeting moment, flooded back for both of them. They stood in silence, letting the weight of years, longing and hope settle around them. Neither spoke for a long time. Words seemed unnecessary when the connection between them was so deep and undeniable. The town of Red Willow continued around them, people going about their daily lives, but for Jack and Ayana the world had narrowed to that single moment. The girl he had saved, the girl who had haunted his thoughts and dreams, had returned. And now there was the possibility of something more: friendship, trust, and perhaps even love. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with soft pinks and purples, they walked toward the ranch together. Each step was filled with cautious hope, the beginning of a story that neither had expected but both had longed for. The journey of the past was behind them, but the journey of their hearts was only just beginning. For Jack and Ayana, the years of separation had not dimmed the bond that had formed in a moment of courage. They had changed, grown, and endured, but the memory of that day, the day one life had been saved by another, remained as strong as ever. And now they had a chance to see what the future might hold, together. The morning sun spilled over the hills surrounding Red Willow, painting the town in warm gold and soft shadows. Birds sang from the trees, and the faint sound of hooves on dusty streets marked the beginning of another busy day. Yet, on the Harper Ranch, the world seemed to slow, as if waiting for something important. Jack stood near the barn, the letter from Ayanna clutched in his hand, rereading it over and over. "I'm the Apache girl you saved years ago. I've returned to find you." The words seemed simple, but to Jack they were more than that. They were a bridge between past and present, a reminder of a day he could never forget. He remembered the fear in her eyes, the way she had trusted him without hesitation, and the small, quiet strength she had shown even as danger surrounded her. That memory had stayed with him for years, growing stronger with each passing day, and now she was coming back into his life. Jack could hardly sit still. He walked to the edge of the porch and gazed out across the fields, imagining her riding toward the ranch. Every rustle in the trees, every flicker of movement in the distance made his heart beat faster. He wondered how much she had grown, what her voice sounded like now, and whether she remembered him as clearly as he remembered her. He thought of all the times he had imagined her. Sometimes she was a frightened girl needing protection. Sometimes she was a strong young woman standing beside him, ready to face the world together. He shook his head, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside him. There was no way to know what the future held, but he could feel that something important was about to happen. Meanwhile, Ayanna's journey toward Red Willow had taken longer than expected. The wilderness was unforgiving, filled with obstacles and challenges that tested her courage and determination. She had ridden through forests where the paths were hidden beneath fallen leaves and tangled roots. She had crossed rivers where the water ran cold and fast, and climbed hills where the wind threatened to push her back. Each day she pressed forward, fueled by hope and a quiet determination. At night, she would make camp under the stars. She would build a small fire, using stones and dry wood, and carefully cook a simple meal of corn and dried meat. As she sat by the fire, she would think of Jack, wondering how he had spent the years since she had last seen him. Did he think of her at all? Did he remember the day he saved her? Her heart ached with longing, but also swelled with hope that soon she would know the answers. On the morning of her arrival in Red Willow, Ayanna felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never been in a town like this before, with its wooden buildings, dusty streets, and people going about their daily lives. Every step brought her closer to the moment she had dreamed of for so long. She adjusted the reins of her horse, took a deep breath, and reminded herself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. Jack, unaware of how close she was, continued his routine on the ranch. He fed the horses, checked the fences, and went about the chores he had done for years. Yet every so often he paused, feeling an inexplicable pull in his chest. He didn't know why, but he felt as if something, or someone, was approaching. Then he heard the sound of hooves. He turned and saw her, riding into the town with a grace and confidence that took his breath away. For a moment he couldn't speak. His heart pounded in his chest, and he felt the years fall away. There she was, Ayanna, the girl he had saved, no longer frightened or helpless, but strong, determined, and alive. Ayanna slowed her horse as she approached the Harper Ranch, her eyes fixed on him. She could see the surprise and recognition in his gaze, and a smile spread across her face. "Jack," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. Jack dropped the rope he had been holding and stepped closer, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Ayana," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Is it really you?" She nodded. "Yes, Jack. It's me. I've returned." They stood for a moment, simply looking at each other. The years of separation, the dangers they had faced, and the uncertainty of life seemed to vanish in that instant. All that mattered was that she was here, and he could see that she was safe, alive, and exactly as he had remembered. Finally, Jack spoke. I thought I would never see you again. I wondered if you had made it home, if you were safe." His voice trailed off, heavy with the weight of the years. Ayana stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "I remembered you every day," she said. "You saved my life, Jack. I never forgot your courage, your kindness. That's why I came back." The sincerity in her voice struck him deeply. He could feel the truth in her words, and it filled him with a warmth he had not felt in years.
You really remembered me?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly.
"I did," she replied, "and I wanted to see you again, to thank you properly, and maybe to stay if you would let me." Jack felt a surge of emotions, relief, joy, and something more profound he could not yet name. He wanted to say so many things, but words seemed inadequate. Instead, he nodded, stepping closer until they were standing face to face.
"You're here, and you're safe, and I pause, unsure how to finish the sentence.
"I'm glad you came back, Ayana. More than I can say." Ayana smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing. "I'm glad too," she whispered. They spent the rest of the day together, walking around the ranch and catching up. Ayana told Jack about her years with her tribe, the lessons she had learned, the hardships she had faced, and the moments when she had thought of him. Jack shared stories of life on the ranch, the challenges of running the land, and the quiet nights when he had thought of her, wondering if she remembered him too. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they sat on a wooden fence overlooking the fields. There was a peacefulness in the air, a sense that time had brought them back together for a reason. Neither of them spoke for a long while, simply enjoying the presence of the other, feeling the bond that had begun years ago in a moment of danger and trust. Jack finally broke the silence.
You've grown into an amazing woman, Ayana. I can see the courage and strength I saw in you that day.
And so much more. Ayana felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "And you? You've always been brave, Jack. Brave enough to stand up for me when I was so small and scared. I've never forgotten that." There was a moment of quiet understanding between them, a shared acknowledgement of the past and the possibilities of the future. The world around them, the town, the fields, the ranch, seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, bound by memories and the unspoken promise of what might come next. As the night settled in, they prepared for the first evening together, sharing a simple meal by the fire. They laughed, exchanged stories, and remembered the past with gentle smiles. It was a reunion filled with hope, warmth, and the knowledge that life had given them a second chance. That night, as they sat by the fire and watched the stars, both Jack and Ayana realized something important. The bond formed in a single moment of courage and trust could last far longer than a lifetime. They had been separated by years and distance, yet their connection had endured, waiting for the right moment to return. And now, with the stars shining above, they could begin to explore what that bond truly meant. Together, the days following Ayana's arrival were filled with a mixture of excitement, curiosity, and quiet tension. Jack and Ayana spent nearly every hour together, walking across the ranch, feeding the horses, and sharing stories of their lives. Though they had known each other only briefly years ago, it felt as if no time had passed at all. There was a rhythm to their companionship, a comfort in the silence between them, and a sense of trust that neither had expected but both cherished deeply. Ayana explored the ranch with fascination. She admired the wide fields, the rows of crops, and the cattle grazing calmly in the distance. She asked questions about everything: how the fences were built, how the crops were cared for, and how Jack managed the ranch by himself. Jack explained patiently, enjoying her curiosity and her sharp mind. She was clever, attentive, and eager to learn, and he found himself admiring her not just for her courage in the past, but for her intelligence and determination in the present. As the week went on, townspeople began to notice the young woman who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Some were curious, others cautious. Ayana's presence sparked quiet whispers in the streets. Who was she? Where did she come from? And most importantly, why was she here? Jack, though protective, could not hide her from the town forever. Ayana was polite and respectful, and she quickly earned the quiet approval of those who met her. Still, there were some who did not approve, who whispered about differences in culture and background. Ayana noticed these subtle reactions, but she refused to let them intimidate her. She had survived danger before, faced long journeys alone, and endured years of uncertainty. The opinions of strangers, she realized, could not shake her courage or her determination. Instead, she focused on the life in front of her, the life she was building with Jack. Every day she learned something new about the ranch, about the people, and about herself. Jack, on the other hand, faced his own struggles. He had grown used to the quiet life on the ranch, managing everything alone. Now, with Ayana by his side, he felt a mix of joy and unease. He was happy to have her with him, but he also worried about the challenges they might face together. There were rules in the town, expectations of behavior, and prejudices that could not be ignored. Still, he could not deny the happiness her presence brought him. The memory of the day he had saved her, the long years of wondering if she had survived, and the relief of seeing her safe again filled him with gratitude and a growing affection he had never anticipated. One afternoon, Jack decided to take Ayana on a ride across the hills surrounding the ranch. They climbed higher and higher, the wind rushing past them and the fields spreading below in a patchwork of green and gold. From the top of the hill, the town of Red Willow looked small and peaceful, a quiet reminder of the world beyond the ranch. Ayana's eyes shone as she looked out across the landscape, feeling a sense of freedom and possibility she had not known for years. "Jack," she said softly, "I never imagined I could see a place like this. It feels different from home, but safe. I feel safe here with you." Jack looked at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "I'm glad you feel that way. I've spent many years on this land, but it never felt quite complete until now. Having you here, it feels right." Ayana blushed, her heart beating faster. She had not expected to hear such words, and yet she felt a warmth in her chest that she had never felt before. I'm glad too," she whispered. Their ride continued in companionable silence, the only sounds the wind in the grass and the soft clip-clop of hooves. Yet beneath the calm exterior, both were aware that their happiness could face challenges. There were rules in Red Willow, and not everyone would approve of a young Apache woman living openly with a cowboy. Jack worried about judgment from the townspeople and how it might affect Ayanna. Ayanna worried about whether she would ever be truly accepted in a place so different from her home. Despite these concerns, they found comfort in each other's presence. They laughed together, shared meals, and spoke late into the night by the fire, their conversations ranging from memories of the past to dreams of the future. Each word, each glance, each moment spent together deepened their connection, creating a bond that neither time nor distance could erase. But life on the frontier was rarely simple. One morning, while Ayanna was helping with the chores, a group of men from the town approached the ranch. They were skeptical of her presence, their expressions filled with curiosity and caution. "Who is she?" one asked, his voice carrying a note of suspicion. "She doesn't belong here, does she?" Jack stepped forward, placing himself between Ayanna and the men. "She belongs here as much as anyone," he said firmly. "She's a guest on my ranch, and she will be treated with respect." The men hesitated, but Jack's steady gaze and firm tone left little room for argument. Eventually, they nodded and left, though their murmurs followed them down the path. Ayanna looked at Jack, a mixture of admiration and gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "You don't need to thank me," Jack replied. "You're strong enough to handle yourself, but some things I can't let go without standing up for you." That evening, as they sat by the fire, Ayanna reflected on the day's events. She realized that life with Jack would not always be easy. There would be challenges, judgments, and moments of fear. But she also realized that she was not alone. Together, they could face anything. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger with each passing moment. They worked side by side on the ranch, explored the hills and forests, and shared quiet evenings under the stars. They began to dream of a future together, a life where they could be honest about their feelings, where they could face challenges together, and where they could create a home built on trust, courage, and love. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Jack took Ayanna's hand. "I know life isn't easy," he said, his voice gentle but serious. "There will be people who don't understand, who won't approve. But I want you to know, I want you to be with me. Here on this ranch and wherever life takes us. If you'll have me, that is." Ayanna looked into his eyes, her heart swelling with emotion. "I will," she whispered. "I've faced fear, danger, and uncertainty before, and I know that together we can face anything. I want to be with you, Jack, wherever life takes us." Tears glistened in Jack's eyes as he pulled her into a gentle embrace. They held each other close, feeling the strength and warmth of their bond. In that moment, the world beyond the ranch, its judgments, dangers, and uncertainties, faded away. All that mattered was the connection they shared, the trust they had built, and the love that was beginning to bloom between them. As the night settled over Red Willow, Jack and Ayanna sat by the fire, hands intertwined, hearts connected, and minds filled with hope. They knew that challenges lay ahead, but they also knew that they had each other. And in the quiet stillness of the night, with stars shining above and the prairie stretching endlessly beyond, they began to imagine a life together, a life where courage, trust, and love would guide them through every obstacle. For the first time in many years, both Jack and Ayanna felt a sense of peace, a sense that life had brought them together for a reason. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever came next, together. And as the fire crackled softly and the night whispered its secrets, they allowed themselves to hope, to dream, and to believe in the promise of a future built on the bond that had begun so many years ago on a distant, dangerous prairie. Word count, approximately 1,300, written in simple, clean English for all audiences, focused on relationship development, emotional connection, and overcoming social challenges, builds tension and hope, setting up the final part of the story. If you want, I can now expand Part 5, where their love is tested, celebrated, and finally solidified in a heartfelt conclusion. Do you want me to continue with Part 5 next? Part of the world? Without heading 13, 100 words, mine simple English words? It should be interesting, and every part should be engaging so the audience doesn't get bored. And don't use any violated word. Avoid any violated content. Absolutely. Here's Part 5 expanded to approximately 1,300 words in simple, clean English, keeping it fully engaging, emotional, and satisfying as the story's conclusion.
The weeks that followed were filled with a quiet, steady happiness.
Jack and Ayana continued to grow closer each day, working together on the ranch, sharing meals, and exploring the hills and forests around Red Willow. Their bond, once forged in a moment of danger and trust, had deepened into a strong mutual affection. Though there were whispers from the town and occasional sideways glances, they faced them together, confident that their connection was stronger than gossip or prejudice. Ayana had learned to care for the animals with a skill and dedication that impressed Jack, while Jack admired her patience and determination. They laughed together, often over small mistakes or playful competitions, and they shared quiet evenings under the stars, talking about dreams and hopes for the future. Each day strengthened the understanding between them, a bond that went beyond friendship or gratitude. It was a love built on shared experiences, courage, and respect. Yet, life on the frontier was never without challenges. One morning, a sudden storm swept through Red Willow. Strong winds tore at the fences, and rain poured down in sheets, turning the fields into mud and threatening the safety of the cattle. Jack and Ayana worked tirelessly to secure the animals, reinforcing fences and guiding the frightened cattle into shelter. By the time the storm passed, they were soaked, exhausted, and covered in mud, but they had protected the ranch from serious damage. Sitting by the fire that evening, warming themselves and drying their clothes, they laughed at their shared disheveled appearance. "I can't believe we survived that without falling into the mud entirely," Ayana said, wiping water from her hair and smiling. Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "I'd call it teamwork. We make a good team, don't we?" She nodded, her eyes bright. "The best team. I don't know what I'd do without you, Jack." It was moments like these that reminded them both of the strength of their connection, the challenges of frontier life, the work on the ranch, and the whispers of townspeople seemed insignificant compared to the bond they shared. They had found something rare and enduring, a love rooted in courage, trust, and shared experience. As winter approached, the two began to speak of a future together. They talked about building a home on the ranch, planting gardens, and raising animals together. Ayana shared stories of her childhood, of the traditions of her people, and of her hopes for a family. Jack shared his own dreams of stability, of a life built on hard work and simple joys, and of finally having someone to share it all with. One evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Jack took Ayana's hand and led her to a quiet spot overlooking the valley. The world around them was silent, blanketed in white, and the only sounds were the soft rustle of trees and the distant lowing of cattle. "Ayana," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "we've been through so much. Danger, separation, and uncertainty. But through it all, I've realized something. I don't want to face life without you. I want you by my side, not just as a friend, but as my partner, my equal, my everything." Ayana's eyes filled with tears, her heart swelling with joy.
Jack?
she whispered. I felt the same way for so long.
I never forgot you, never stopped thinking of you, and I always hoped that one day we would be together again. And now, here we are. I want to be with you, Jack. Always. Ha 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 ha. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring, a symbol of his commitment. Will you marry me, Ayana? Will you build a life with me here, on this land, through all of its joys and challenges? Tears streamed down Ayana's cheeks as she nodded, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Jack. Yes, I will. The weeks that followed were filled with preparations for the wedding. Jack and Ayana worked together to repair and decorate a small clearing near the edge of the ranch. They strung garlands of wildflowers, built benches from rough-hewn logs, and invited neighbors who had come to respect and admire them over the past weeks. There was excitement in the air, a quiet anticipation that something special was about to happen. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze. The sun shone brightly, illuminating the fields and casting a golden glow over the town and the ranch. Friends and neighbors gathered, forming a small but heartfelt crowd, while Jack and Ayana stood together at the center of the clearing. Their hands were entwined, their hearts beating in unison, and their eyes locked in a shared understanding of the journey that had brought them here. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. There were no grand decorations or formalities, only love, sincerity, and the natural beauty of the frontier. The words exchanged were heartfelt, a promise to protect, respect, and cherish each other through all of life's challenges. When the final words were spoken and they were pronounced, husband and wife, a cheer rose from the small gathering, filling the air with joy. Jack and Ayana embraced, feeling the weight of the years melt away. The bond that had begun in fear, nurtured by trust, and strengthened by courage, was now sealed in love and commitment. They knew that life would not always be easy. There would be storms, challenges, and moments of doubt, but they also knew that together they could face anything. After the ceremony, they walked hand in hand through the fields, their hearts full of hope and excitement. Ayana's laughter rang out, pure and joyful, as Jack spun her around, and she leaned into him with a sense of safety and belonging she had never known before. The town watched with warmth and admiration, recognizing that this union was built not on fleeting desire, but on courage, trust, and enduring love. As evening fell, they sat together under the stars, the cool night air wrapped around them like a gentle embrace. They spoke of their dreams for the future, of children, of a thriving ranch, of a life filled with love, laughter, and shared adventures. They knew the road ahead would have challenges, but they also knew that their love had already survived the greatest tests: fear, separation, and the uncertainties of life itself. Ayana rested her head on Jack's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I never imagined that life could bring me back to you," she whispered. Jack kissed her forehead gently. "Neither did I, but I'm glad it did. I'm glad every moment led me to you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one, feeling the quiet joy of being together at last. In that moment, they understood something profound. True courage is not just facing danger, but facing life with love and trust. True strength is not just surviving hardships, but sharing them with someone who stands by your side. And true love is not just found in moments of happiness, but in the bonds that endure through time, distance, and trials. In the weeks and months that followed, Jack and Ayana continued their life together on the ranch. They faced storms, cared for the animals, and built a home filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Their relationship inspired those around them, showing that trust, courage, and devotion could bridge even the widest gaps and overcome the deepest challenges. And though the frontier remained wild and unpredictable, Jack and Ayanna knew they would face it together. Their hearts were united, their bond unbreakable, and their love, a love born in fear, nurtured by courage, and solidified through trust, would guide them through every season of life. As the sun set on their first winter together as husband and wife, they stood hand in hand at the edge of the fields, looking out at the world they had chosen to share. The journey that had begun with a moment of rescue, a single act of bravery, had led to a lifetime of love and partnership. And in that quiet golden light, Jack and Ayanna knew that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, forever connected by the bond that had started years ago in the wilderness, under a sky filled with uncertainty and hope.